Hello and welcome back, everyone. Today I'm going to be taking a look at Metro 2033 Redux. I was intending to play through the original, I think 2011 release for this video, but unfortunately that has basically been entirely delisted. I fucking hate it when video game companies decide to create a remaster slash remake and then delist the original version. And naturally, this is one of those cases. I know there are usually ways to get around delisting, such as like abandonware sites or sailing the high seas, but for some reason, even then, it's still quite difficult to get your hands on even going through those avenues, which really sucks because there's a pretty heated debate between the Metro community about what is better, the original version or the Redux edition. And since I've only ever played the Redux version, I really was kind of looking forward to playing through the original. Back in 2017, it did seem like they actually gave out like the original version of the game completely for free for anyone that would claim it on Steam, but unfortunately I was not privy to that. I did not end up taking part in that. So because I missed that, it's basically next to impossible to get your hands on this game without spending money on some shady key from some key reselling website, which I'm not going to do. So unfortunately, I did just bite the bullet and decide to play through the Redux version, which for the most part is okay. So with that being said, I will not be comparing this to the original in any capacity. I will treat this like it is the very first version of Metro 2033 to come out because I really don't know what the differences are and it would not be fair to talk about them. So with no further ado, let's look at what makes Metro 2033 such an amazing video game. For the most part, I didn't have any issues running this game. I didn't experience any major crashes or any major glitches or anything like that. However, I have heard of people having trouble running the Redux version of this game. I don't know how pervasive that is or anything like that. I did have some frame drops, but again, I think a large part of that is due to my computer not being great. But for the most part, I didn't have any major performance issues. So that's good. I'm always happy when I don't have to deal with a bunch of glitches, crashes, and horrible and completely unoptimized video games. But as for the rest of how this game looks and the rest of the presentation, it is gorgeous. This is probably one of my personal favorite games when it comes to the aesthetics. I love how Metro 2033 looks. The level design in terms of its like art direction is so beautiful. You could really feel like you are walking through these towns or this destroyed surface area that just went through a horrible nuclear war. You can feel the history in these locations, and it's all just really well designed. I think in large part that is because this is a very linear game, unlike some of its other contemporaries such as Stalker. So the developers are able to control what you see a lot better. They're able to create much more detailed environments, and they did a phenomenal job. Every single area in this game looks great. Some of my personal favorites are actually the towns and the cities you go to. They are just incredibly dense and borderline claustrophobic. There's people all over the place. There's incredibly small and cramped platforms, and it just feels like people have been living in there for over 20 years and they have actually made a life in these metro tunnels. Exploring outside of the cities as well are also great. Going into some of the more abandoned metro tunnels or some of the more desolate metro tunnels are also just really eerie and creepy and kind of grotesque in ways. There's dead bodies and skeletons just scattered around the place. You can tell there's a lot of horrible, horrific things that have transpired within these metro tunnels. Sometimes you even see what it looked like before the war and remnants of that, and that's always really good. And I always really liked that. You can kind of start creating this mythology within your head. You can kind of start understanding what has happened here, what life was like before the war and how it shifted after. It's just really well done. The surface is eerie and lonely and terrifying. It's one of those things that it's hard to explain, but I'm hoping it's coming off by just watching the gameplay footage. You can just see how much detail and how much love, care, and passion was put into every single environment in this game. And they fucking nailed it. They nailed it. They did a really, really good job. And this is one of the reasons why I'm such a big fan of what I'm going to refer to as the Soviet nuclear apocalypse genre. Now, I should be clear clear with what I mean by that, because this whole genre started with a book called Roadside Picnic by authors I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce. They're Russian authors. And I love that book. That's an excellent book that started this whole genre with like the Stalker movie that came out shortly after it that was based off of the book. And then you have the Stalker games, and then Metro came as kind of a sister franchise from this, from a splinter group that broke off from GSC Games to make Metro. But it's funny how all of this, like what I call that Soviet nuclear post-apocalyptic genre, actually stems from Roadside Picnic, that neither takes place in the Soviet area, specifically in Canada it takes place, and has nothing to do with nuclear apocalypse. It's just some kind of alien invasion. It just oozes this exact same atmosphere and feelings that the Stalker and Metro games elicit. And just, it's become one of my personal favorite settings for any video game. I love the Stalker games. I love Roadside Picnic. I love the Metro games. I need to read the Metro book because this is based off of a book, by the way, but I just love it so much. I personally do prefer the Stalker games. I definitely enjoy that franchise more as a whole, but I do think Metro one-ups it in terms of its world design. Again, due in large part to that linearity that they have and that control the developers and the art directors are able to put into this game, which Stalker does not have the benefit of due to the very fact that it is a much more open world. This is not shitting on Stalker's world. I love Stalker's world. It's one of my personal favorite in all of video games. I just think Metro does a much better job at kind of realizing a much more realistic interpretation of what that world would look like. I also know that they are incredibly different types of settings, where Stalker is based more off of this small exclusion zone that is cordoned off from the rest of the world, where Metro is actually just civilization receding down into the Metro tunnels after the war happens. But I still think this game feels a lot more lived in than what your Stalker games feel like. And that's something I've always appreciated a lot over Metro, over the Stalker franchises, is that because of that linearity, they are able to make this feel so much more real, so much more alive, so much more horrific and terrifying. And they did a very, very good job with that here. And I'm excited to see and get to Metro Exodus, because Metro Exodus goes a little more open world from this one. And I wonder if they're able to keep that same core atmosphere and that same feeling of lived-inness that this game has once they go more open world. The last thing for the presentation I want to talk about is the voice acting. Now, one of the things that I will be comparing to the original version of what I've heard and what I've seen from the original version of Metro 2033 is that the voice acting's quite rough. And they definitely fixed that within the Redux version. Most of the voice actors are different, and a lot of them are a lot better, such as like Artyom, your main character, with the one exception being the child. Why? Everyone already complained about the child voice actor in the original version of this game being shitty, and it's like they listened to that feedback. It was like, okay, cool. Let's make it even worse than it was there. And they did it. They succeeded. I will give them that. This child voice actor is one of the absolute worst child in anything I have ever listened to. He is grating as all hell. I don't know why they didn't just find somebody better. I kind of like it though. I find it really funny that they took the feedback from the original Metro game and were like, okay, cool. Let's make it even worse. Let's fuck with people even more so. And if that was their intention, I think they succeeded. The kid is extremely annoying in this version of the game, more so than the original Metro release. So congratulations, you made it even more annoying kid character. But to wrap up the presentation, I think it's just gorgeous. It's a gorgeous game. It runs well. It's decently well voice acted. The sound design is quite solid. Everything about the presentation of this game is really, really good. As for the story in this game, you play as Artyom, a doe-eyed, Metro-born guy. Basically, he's for the most part, he's a silent protagonist, with the exception of in the loading screens. He will kind of give you a recap of what's going on, but outside of the loading screens, he doesn't say a fucking word to anyone. But early on in the game, your little community that you live in, that Artyom lives in, is threatened by a new species called the Dark Ones, a new mutant species that we don't understand. And you are tasked with going to Polis, some city inside of the Metro, to warn the Order about this threat to see if we can actually deal with it. And so that's the game, is you just go on this adventure and it kind of expands from there. There's a few twists and turns and all that kind of stuff. I can't really go in too in depth into any of the bits without spoiling things. This is one of those stories I think it's better to just go in a little more blind. As for like the core emotions that I felt, I really like it. I thought it was a very gripping story. It's well paced. I think it does a good job at giving you answers at the times I would have wanted answers. It doesn't drag its feet. There doesn't feel like a lot of story pacing or princesses in the other tower syndrome. It feels like the story moves at what I feel is a very natural pace for an adventure of this sort. The hook is great. I was very intrigued by the mystery of the Dark Ones, and I felt inclined and encouraged to continue playing the game to try to get those answers. And when I did, I felt very satisfied with the Dark Ones as a narrative concept. And while none of the characters were super engrossing or great, I thought they were more than serviceable for the story they were trying to tell. They were fun, they felt unique, they felt different and individualized from one another. I didn't feel like they were all just the same carbon copy, same cardboard cutout, boring one-dimensional character. I mean, they were a little one-dimensional due to the fact that they just don't ever get that much screen time, but I like all of them. They do all have a nasty habit of fucking dying on me. Like, genuinely, so many people die on this journey that RDM goes on. All of my friends are dead, with a few exceptions. But it's one of those things that I think helps flesh out and makes this adventure feel a little more grand, right? There's a lot of casualties. You meet and lose friends on this admittedly short but very fulfilling adventure you go on. The game also gets quite introspective as well, which I found very satisfying. I can't really go into details at this section. There will be a spoiler section towards the end of the video where I will go more in depth into my feelings of the themes and what it is introspective of, but it is a very introspective story, and I like that a lot. I'm never going to turn down a good introspective story, and this, I think, does a decent job at that. The story, while I think is very serviceable for this game, it is just serviceable, right? One of the themes of this video and this review that's going to become pretty reoccurring is that while I really love this game, none of its individualized elements I think are all that outstanding or even all that original. Everything is kind of in a way derivative, and I don't mean this really in a pejorative sense. A lot of this game's story, a lot of how it's presented, the gameplay elements feels very derivative of a lot of the games from its time. But what it does is it comes together to create something truly magical. All of the elements are strong enough that when combined, it creates a whole that is very much greater than the sum of its parts. And this story is a great example of that. While the characters aren't personally great, while the introspective aspects and the theming and the ideas that the game is trying to express aren't necessarily all that original or great, when you combine all of these elements together, you get a very solid, very well-paced, very fun, engaging story that lasts through this game's runtime, with a little bit of introspection and commentary to add a little cherry on top. When I say this game is derivative, when I say this game is unoriginal, when I say this game is, in its elements, unexceptional, I never mean this as a holistic value judgment on the rest of the game. The whole game is phenomenal. It's just the perfect examples of how sometimes being derivative can make something very special. Not everything needs to be unique. Not everything needs to be special or perfect or the best ever to make something that is great. And this is one of those perfect examples of that. And this is also very much exemplified inside of the gameplay as well. So, what is the gameplay like? Well, the core gameplay loop cycles between three different elements: stealth, first-person shooting combat, and exploration, and how it transitions and flows from one element to another element is extremely well done. All of the levels in this game are crafted to complement these elements, to transition from one to the other in a way that feels very seamless. It feels very natural how it flows from one thing to the next. I hope this is kind of making sense. It's a weird thing that sometimes you get with video games, is it feels very disjointed. It feels like they designed it with this idea of really cool set pieces or scenes, and then they just tried to find a way to kind of cobble that all together, while the transitional periods between those really high octane moments kind of then feel lackluster, feel underwhelming. This game does not have that as a thing. The quiet times that linked the set pieces together feel just as intentional as the set pieces themselves. And in a lot of the times, those transitional periods actually feel even better than the set pieces, where sometimes the set pieces can almost come off as the transitional element versus the quiet time, which tends to be the transitional element. Again, I hope this makes sense, but it's a very small thing that shows just how much care and love was put into this game. At no point do I feel like they begrudgingly had to add an element. Everything does feel like it was was made with love and passion and care. And that's what really makes this game really come together. It is the passion of the developers that holds all of these elements, all of these individualized elements into a really solid whole. And the level design itself very much facilitates that feeling. Because one minute you'll go from exploring this desolate and horrific tunnel, then you'll go into this really solid stealth section, and then that will transition into like a turret section, or that will then transition into a massive gunfight. And it never feels disjointed. It never feels like these are bespoke elements that are kind of cobbled together. They feel and flow very naturally with one another. And this is, I think, what makes me really care about this game and really, really like it, is that it's that passion that is palpable. You can feel it. You can taste it. This is most exemplified within the core level design itself. I think they do a very good job at designing these levels around the strengths of its own systems. So what are these systems like? Well, the combat I like. It's not the best ever. I definitely think the Stalker games do a better job at the combat than this one, but I think it's very solid. I should probably say I played through this game on hardcore difficulty. There are multiple difficulties within this game. You got normal, you got hardcore, you got ranger, and then you got ranger hardcore. As much as I wanted to engage with the ranger things, because they definitely are a lot more of a hardcore playstyle, if you will, I think you have much more limited ammunition than you do in the hardcore game mode, and the damage model is much more realistic, where you can die in one shot, but so can the enemies. And as much as I would have loved to play through that mode for this review, unfortunately, for some reason, they also linked those ranger game modes with a limited UI as well, which I think was a mistake, because I am an idiot. I am a stupid idiot that has a horrible memory, and I need my UI. I need it. I'm going to forget how to turn on the fucking flashlight. Even with the UI, I kid you not, I forgot I had a flashlight I could turn on for probably 85% of the game. For my entire light source, I basically just either transitioned between the night vision goggles once I finally got those and the lighter that you have. I completely forgot that I had a flashlight available to me for most of this game, and I was playing with the UI difficulty modes. So can you imagine how fucking horrible of an experience I would have had if I tried to play this on Ranger mode? It wouldn't have worked well for me. It would have been a disaster. I would have embarrassed myself more than I've already embarrassed myself. So for that reason, I decided to just stick with the regular hardcore mode. And while I definitely thought it was a little on the easy side, because I've played through this game like 3 or 4 times before, so I feel like I'm pretty familiar with the gameplay of Metro. I definitely felt like the hardcore was a little bit easy, but I still thought it was a satisfying enough challenge that kept me engrossed throughout the game. I just wish it punched me a little bit harder, and I would have gotten that with the Ranger mode, but I'm too big of a baby bitch for it. But as for the combat itself, even on the hardcore mode, I thought it was fun. It's very satisfying. There's a decent audio-visual feedback. There's a lot of tension to it because of the resource scarcity, so you got to be careful to make sure you're not abusing too much ammo. The audio, while not being like the best audio ever, not being a Battlefield game, is more than serviceable. That I think added a decent punch to the weapons, and I really like a lot of the reload sound effects. The animations for the reloads are actually just really good. Some of the weapons have some nifty reload animations. There's this one shotgun with like this cylinder chamber that you have to kind of load up, and I like how that is reloaded in the game quite a bit. So, like everything else in this game, it's solid. It's good, but it's not great. It's not great combat. Where the gameplay actually becomes really satisfying is how that meshes really well with the stealth mechanics. And the stealth is where this game actually gets really, really easy. Stealth is very overpowered. You basically go from just a guy to a fucking god once you just enter into the shadows. You can add silencers to your weapons. There's this like weird gas-powered pellet gun that is completely silent as well. There's throwing knives, and you can sneak up behind people and stab them in the throat. So you have a lot of stuff at your disposal that you can play around with that helps you sneak around. You can also turn off lights and hide in the shadow, and there's a little thing on your watch as well that lights up blue whenever you are fully hidden, which is really fun. It reminds me a lot of Thief and Splinter Cell, and I love games where I get to be a man of the shadows, hiding from people in pure darkness, sneaking up behind them and just fucking ruining their day. And this does a really good job at that. I also really like liked kind of combining the stealth with the combat, sneaking around for a bit, kind of getting the lay of the area, getting a plan, understanding where the enemies are, and then just kind of going loud, but in a very controlled way where I kind of just funnel them all into an area that I know. And so I can take out like 10 people without ever actually being shot. I think that's always very fun. I love stealth combat hybrids. It's probably some of my favorite gameplay style in like any video game. And I think this game does a really good job of blending and mixing those two together. A lot of the tension in the gunfights aren't necessarily from its raw difficulty, but comes from the ammo scarcity itself. Ammo is fairly limited in this game. In my playthrough, I was never super dry or anything like that. I would imagine as I get up into the higher ranger difficulties, that would become a much bigger problem. But for my playthrough on my hardcore difficulty, I didn't really ever find myself completely dry of ammo, but it was always a thing I had to keep in the back of my mind. And that helps kind of build the tension within the fights, because you don't want to go too loud and get into this massive gunfight where you're using a lot of ammo, because if you're not careful, you will run dry, even on those lesser difficulties. So I like that. It adds a nice little tension element and a little bit of challenge that kept me engaged through the fights, even if it never really pushed me as much as I would have liked it to. The weapons themselves are fantastic. This is where I have to make a little bit of a confession that I'm a horrible reviewer and I have to apologize. I did not get to try out all of the weapons. Not because I couldn't, but because I just kind of got too comfy with the weapons that I liked and missed out on what seems to be some very fun weapon design. My favorite one, there's this fucking belt-fed shotgun LMG thing. I don't even know, but that's sick as shit, and I don't know why I never touched it through my playthrough. It is a personal failure on my part, and I would completely understand if you want to unsubscribe, because I am stupid. But the weapons I did get to play around with, I enjoyed quite a bit. There's a lot of different types of shotguns in this game, and I like that. I like the one that has like the more cylinder type of loading mechanism. Mostly I just liked it because of its reloading animation, because I thought it was so unique type of weapon design that I just couldn't help but love. But my personal favorite weapon has to be that weird gas-powered pellet gun thingy. I love it. I love that you also have to like manage your gas levels, making sure it's properly pumped up. But it's not only really helpful in stealth due to it being completely silent, but it's also just really effective in other kinds of combat. But you can't just go all out with it. You can't just unload it because of that pressure system within the gun. So I think that's balanced very nicely, and it made for a very fun weapon. For the most part, I just kind of stuck with the AK-47 because I'm a basic scrub like that. But even with those more basic weapons, I still thought the combat system was more than serviceable, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. But where I really love this gameplay, where it goes from just solid to something great, and what makes this game so much fun to play and especially so immersive, is all of the other random elements you kind of have to keep track of, such as the pumping of the gas into the pellet gun thing. But you also have a gas mask that has a certain amount of health, so you got to make sure you have a non-broken gas mask, and then there's filters to go with those, and you only have a certain amount of filter time, so you got to ensure that you're looking around, making sure that you have enough filters to get through the next section. You also have to then pay attention to your RDM's watch to ensure that you are replacing the filters at the right moment, because you really don't want to get caught in the middle of like a mutant ambush with your filter dying, because it's like a 5 to 10-second animation to reload a filter, and that can literally mean life or death in some gunfights in this game. Or how your flashlight and night vision goggles are powered by a battery that you have to constantly recharge, which again, you don't want to find yourself with no power in the middle of a gunfight. So you got to maintain mindfulness of all of these systems, and this really helps grab the player and put them into the world, really keeps them there as well. Because you have to be so mindful of all of these elements, you become very conscientious of your surroundings, of making sure that you are exploring every nook and cranny, because you never know will there be another filter. And it's not just these elements too. Of course, you need to also maintain decent ammo levels, and you got to make sure you have enough med packs. And there's just a lot of resource management that exists within this game that I think it's just another little mechanical addition that I think really ties everything together. There was a lot of thought put into just the core gameplay loop in this game. One of my personal favorite parts of the game, though, is set pieces. At first, I was a little mixed on these because some of them feel a little Call of Duty, like you're just running away from like a hail of gunfire and everyone seems to be like a stormtrooper, so they miss you with every single bullet they have. And I was like, oh, well, this is just trend chasing. But as I played through the game and as I thought about it, I actually really, they started to grow on me a little bit. I started to feel like they were a better addition than a detriment to the game. It kind of enhancing the adventure a little bit, making it feel more epic, more expansive, more kind of fun, more like an adventure. There's a lot of things that happen in this game. This game is not afraid to go from high octane, crazy Call of Duty level action to slow, methodical horror. And I like that type of roller coaster. I like when my adventure has ups and downs, peaks and valleys. And this does a really good job with that with the set pieces. And a lot of them are really unique as well. Of course, you also have your running away from a hail of gunfire that was really popular in the mid 2010s. Of course, have your turret sections and stuff like that. But my personal favorite of the set pieces are the ones where you have to like kind of hold out against a massive ambush of mutants. Usually it's holding out while a door slowly opens behind you. I loved these. One, they can be probably some of the hardest parts of the game. There were a few of them I was just barely able to make it out by the skin of my teeth. And they work as these massive resource checks that if you don't have the ammo, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you. But why I like them so much is not the actual moment to moment of playing these sections, but what they do for the rest of the gameplay. Because you never know when there'll be this next mutant ambush set piece, right? You have to constantly be aware of it. You are constantly thinking about like, when's the next one? Do I have the ammo to survive this? And that creates this really great sense of tension that I think strengthens the rest of the combat. Because now you're thinking in this gunfight is, shit, well, do I want to waste all of my ammo here? I don't know what will happen directly after I get through this area. I think that helps strengthen this game a lot, is having to constantly be on edge of when the next time I was going to get fucked by 40 mutants. And again, that then brings us back to my core theme of this review, is none of the elements of the gameplay are really all that outstanding or even all that remarkable, right? Like the core first-person shooting combat is serviceable to good. The stealth is serviceable to good. The set pieces are very derivative but fun. But it all just comes together to create a very satisfying video game. There's a reason this is my third to fourth playthrough. I really don't remember how many times I've beaten this game, why I keep coming back to this one, even though I've never played Last Light or Exodus yet. It's just because I am engrossed in the world this creates, and I'm engaged through the gameplay. It's just a very solid 2010s first-person shooter that really holds up even to this day. The game is good. I think that's the best way I can sum it up. I don't think I can put it any more succinctly that this is a good video game, and it has a good video game gameplay. And yeah, that's it. So that's going to kind of wrap up my spoiler-free section of this video. Before I go, I'll just give a kind of recap and a recommendation for this game, if I will. I really like it. As you could probably tell, I am a big fan of Metro 2033. This is personally one of my favorite games of all time, in large part due to the setting, but just everything else around it, I think just comes together to create a very solid video game. If you are a fan of horror, post-apocalyptic games, survival shooters, anything like that, if this game looks appealing to you and you have yet to give Metro 2033 a shot, I highly recommend it, especially in anticipation for the new Metro game coming out, I think this summer? I forgot the name of it, but new Metro game coming out. Just got announced relatively recently and I'm extremely excited, which is why I went back and played through 2033. And I intend to play through Last Light next and Exodus shortly after. I love this video game. It's phenomenal. And I highly recommend it. So, like I said, that's going to be it for the spoiler-free section. If you have yet to play this game, I strongly encourage you click off now and come back after you have beaten it, because I am going to spoil the complete ending of this game. So, if you are taking off, I hope you enjoyed. If you would please like, comment, subscribe, share the video, do whatever the fuck you have to do with YouTube videos, and I will catch you on my next review. Bye! Okay, I assume anyone that is still here is here for the spoilers. It's just us girls now. Ooh, So exciting. So the first thing I want to talk about in the spoiler section is there's two endings to this game. I personally got the bad ending, what is I think called the Ranger ending. This is also the canonical ending. This is the one that Last Light will pick up directly from. There is also I don't want to say a secret ending, but an alternative ending called the Enlightened ending, which is oftentimes referred to as the good ending. I definitely think I prefer the bad ending, if you will, for this game. I think a lot of what the good ending does is just to explain things that were already pretty apparent within the bad ending of the game. So I should probably explain what the actual ending is in this game. So in your quest to stop the Dark Ones, you learn about this D6 missile silo thing, and you end up heading down there to try to reactivate the silo, in which you will then use to bomb the botanical gardens in which the Dark Ones live. So you end up climbing to the top of this tower while you keep getting these visions and hallucinations from the Dark One. You get to the top of the tower, you activate the targeting device, you then basically nuke the botanical gardens where the Dark Ones are. And then Artyom gets this kind of speech about how and how he doesn't know if he made the right choice. And that's because it becomes increasingly clear as you progress, especially through the tower, that the Dark Ones aren't necessarily a inherent antagonistic force. While they are hostile in some degree, more of a self-defense kind of way versus ontologically evil. And so a lot of the visions that you as Artyom are experiencing becomes extremely clear that those are more of the Dark Ones trying to communicate with you versus them trying to fuck with you. But they get increasingly more desperate as the journey goes on. So as you are starting to climb the tower to activate the targeting device, things start getting a little more lethal for you. So at the very end, right after you plant the target, or right when you're at the top of the tower, you will end up going through this long vision sequence. And if you fuck up that vision sequence, like say you run into the Dark One chasing you or something like that, you actually then cut to a cutscene of Artyom falling off the tower. So it's very clear that the Dark Ones are basically mind controlling you to just have you kill yourself so they can save themselves. And it's just very obvious that these people are acting more in self-defense than a desire to harm humans. It's all just one big misunderstanding, and they're desperately trying to find a way to communicate with you as Artyom. And that's the bad ending of the game. The good ending actually has Artyom figuring this shit out and stopping it. I think by shooting the targeting system as that falls then to the ground, and the Dark Ones are saved, woo! And you get a big quote from H.G. Wells about how war breeds war, violence begets violence, all that kind of stuff. And then you get the final line from Artyom is this will not be the last time we have contact with the Dark Ones. And so that's kind of what I mean, is all of these things that the good ending says can be inferred and I think picked up on by just watching the bad ending, which is why I think the bad ending not only narratively fits the game a little bit better, but I think is just a slightly more subtle and satisfying ending that requires you to kind of think a little bit. However, it makes Artyom look like a fucking idiot. Because Artyom does realize that maybe the Dark Ones were just acting more in self-defense, that maybe they weren't just ontologically evil, but he doesn't figure that out until he is watching the botanical gardens get nuked. He is watching the extinction of this species through nukes happen, while he is then just standing on the top of this building are we the baddies? And it's no shit, bud. For the whole time while climbing this mountain, you just constantly had visions of them being we must stop him. He's trying to kill us. We must stop him. And it's how the fuck can you not pick up that they're clearly just trying to communicate with you and that maybe we should take a fucking step back before just nuking them into fucking orbit? But no, that would require Artyom to think, which he is fucking incapable of doing. And as much as I wanted to criticize this as kind of a writing failure, it's so fucking funny to just watch as Artyom just follows orders throughout the entire game, never at once critically examining his role in this potential extinction until the very end when it is way too fucking late. I found it pretty funny. He just this dead-eyed, just bone moron that is not really capable of thinking. And I found this at least decently humorous that I got enough of a kick out of it that kept me from being bothered by just kind of how stupid RDM is. As for what the story is, it's that classic violence begets violence, war begets war storyline. It's nothing unique. It's nothing all that special. It's stuff you've seen 100 times before, so there's not really that much to say. It's a pretty basic theme that you'll see in stories about war and conflict, especially in post-apocalyptic stories. So it doesn't do anything unique there, but again, like I said earlier on, I'm never going to turn down an introspective story, and that's what this was. It was an introspective story. It did have you kind of re-examine your role that you are playing as the character, and makes you like re-examine like, oh, are we the baddies? And that I enjoy. I'm not, like I said, while it's nothing unique or nothing special, it definitely works for the game that this is, and I think it mostly works to its benefit. If the gameplay itself was shit, if the world was shit, and this is the only thing the game had to say, I think I'd be a lot more critical of it. But since everything else around this game is so solid and so much fun and so good, this being, it's a cherry on top. It doesn't detract from anything. The only thing it really does is to enhance. And that's kind of what I thought of the themes underpinning this game and that introspective elements. It's a fun story. It's a good story, and I liked it a lot, even if it was kind of unremarkable. And so to wrap up again, I fucking love Metro. It's just a very solid video game. There's really nothing I hate about this game. There's things that I think maybe could have been a little different, could have been a little better. There's nitpicks I could have had. It's not a flawless masterpiece, but everything that I found as a negative was basically irrelevant by the time I got to trying to film this review. The only thing that is sticking with me is the positives and the greatness of this game, and I had a blast replaying this again, and I will be playing it again probably in a few years soon. So it's just a game I think I will just come back to every couple years, give it a run through. It's decently short at only I think around like 8 to 10 hours, and it at no point ever overstays its welcome. If anything, it is the perfect length for this game. Nothing feels padded, nothing feels redundant. It is just a solid and good video game. And so if you have yet to play it, I, again, highly recommend it to pretty much anyone that's a fan of video games. I think it's just one of those games that I really just think everyone should experience. And so that's my review for Metro 2033. What a phenomenal video game. Truly love it, and I'm excited to finally actually dive into Last Light, even though I've heard it's not as good as this one, but I've heard Exodus is a phenomenal game, and I'm really excited to also play through that. So I hope to find you there on those next videos, and I will leave you here. If you would like, comment, subscribe, share the video, all that stuff, and I hope you have a terrific day. Goodbye.